Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Lewis, um, and I'm a private investigator for the state of West Virginia. And I started this channel primarily because I got a lot of people sending me DMs through Facebook, and I try to help everybody I can, but I was getting so many of those messages that it was hard for me to scroll through them and find the ones whenever somebody that I knew sent me one that I really needed to get. I would have to scroll through pages and pages of them to find the one I needed. So this way, it makes it easier because anybody that's got a question about problem investigation or a case that they may want me to look at, just leave it in the comments and I'll read every comment and I'll try to answer as many as I can. And if it's a private one that you don't want to publicly post on a comment, you can send me a DM through YouTube and I'll answer directly to you that way. But the other thing that I'm going to do with this channel is a lot of people ask me, what's your most exciting case, or that type of thing that you've handled. And so I'm probably going to do one of these videos a week. At least that's what I'm going to try to do first, starting off. And I want to tell one story that I think people will find interesting. I deal with a lot of missing person cases. In fact, I've handled more missing person cases than I have anything else since I've been a private investigator. On the personal level, it's been mostly missing person cases. On the business side, it's been mostly embezzlement cases. By far, it's been mostly embezzlement cases. But a couple of them, unfortunately, when you deal with missing person cases, a lot of them don't end well. And yeah, that's emotionally and mentally hard. But just like a police officer does, as much as you don't want it to, it does desensitize you to it after a while because you've dealt with it for so long. And I don't want to get to that point. So I took a break from working on those cases for a while and started working on mostly business cases. And to be honest with you, they pay better anyway. I charge more than most private investigators do. I'm the first one to admit that. But every case that I've ever had that's involved a child, I've done pro bono. I have never charged anybody for a case that involved a child, whether it was expected child abuse and neglect, whether it was a missing child, anything that involves a child, I've always done pro bono, and I always will. But the reason why I hope that people will enjoy the channel is because each week I will tell you a story about a case that I had that wasn't the norm. It stood out in a way that made it sometimes funnier, more interesting. But my first case that I'm going to talk to you about today is one of the saddest cases that I had. And no, there was no death involved. It was just a really, really poor outcome when I solved the case. I had a friend of mine contact me that one of their friends needed to hire me because they were positive that their wife was cheating with either their best friend or their brother. And they wanted to know which one. And so I took the case, and I followed both his best friend and his brother for a week each, and not one time did they ever go to his house to meet his wife or anything. And so I wasn't getting anything there. So what I did was I started following his wife instead, and I got the answer to what was going on. And he was right. She was cheating, but it wasn't with his best friend or his brother. It was actually a lot worse. And so when I met him, I told him, I said, look, I said, I will tell you part of this for free. And I said, if you don't make me go in any more detail, I said, I won't charge you anything. I will do the case pro bono. And he owed me, I'd worked on it for like 3 weeks, so he would owe me about, probably about $35,000, somewhere around in there, for the amount of hours I'd worked on it. And I told him, I said, I'll do it for free if you just let me just leave it at, yes, your wife's cheating, but it's not your best friend and it's not your brother. And he refused. He said, absolutely not. I want to know who it is. And I told him flat out, I said, if I tell you the truth, it's going to destroy your life. And he looked at me kind of funny. And he said, well, if it's not my best friend, it's not my brother. He says, it's not going to destroy my life. I said, yes, it will. I said, I'm telling you right now, it will destroy your life if I tell you. I said, at least it will destroy you mentally and emotionally if I tell you the entire story. I said, I don't want to do that. I said, I would much rather just do the case for free, leave it, was giving you the information that you really need, which is that your wife is cheating and it's not your best friend, it's not your brother. He wouldn't do it. He was adamant. He wanted to know who it was. And he said that if I didn't tell him, he was just going to start following his wife until he found out on his own. And I did not want him to see what I saw, because when I get an infidelity case, I can't just go to them and say, yes, they're cheating, no, they're not cheating. I have to have proof. So I have to have pictures and video proving that they're having an affair. And I had that in this case. I didn't want it. And in fact, when I got the video of it, I didn't know who it was. I talked to my friend, the one who had referred me to the guy, and I said, look, I said, she's cheating, but it's not with his best friend or his brother, because I got a picture of them. And I said, I followed them for a week each. I said, it's not them. I said, but I don't know who this guy is. I said, he's an older man. I said, but I don't know who it is. And he said, well, show me the video and let me see if I know who it is. And so I did. And his face turned white. And he said, oh my dear God. And I was like, what? He said, that's his dad. His wife was having an affair with his dad. So yeah, you can see why I did not want to tell him this. And he would not let it go. He was adamant that he wanted to know who it was, and that if I didn't tell him, he was just going to follow his wife around until he figured it out on his own. So I might as well go ahead and tell him. And I did not want him catching her in the kind of position that I'd caught her in, because I was afraid of what might happen. And so I told him, I said, okay, I said, you thought it was your best friend and your brother because you felt like it was somebody really close to you. And I said, you got that part right. I said, but you got the person wrong. And he said, what do you mean? I said, your wife is having an affair with your dad. And he accused me of lying. He blew up. He said, absolutely not. I mean, he went off. And I said, I can't make these accusations without proof. I said, I've got it on video. And he said, show me the video. And so I showed him the video, and he grabbed my phone and threw it against the wall and shattered it, which I didn't care, because if I was in that position, I probably would have reacted the same way. So I wasn't even mad or upset that he broke my phone. I knew I was going to get another one, but I mean, I knew why he was acting the way he was. But it does. And when he paid me, he paid me an extra $2,000, and I asked him what the extra $2,000 was for, and he said to get you a new phone. And I said, nah, it's all right. I said, I can just pay for the phone. He said, no. He said, I want to pay for it. And so he ended up giving me the money for the new phone anyways. But it goes to prove that there's times, I mean, a lot of people, most people think that being a private investigator is, all this glitz and glamour, and, you got all these really exciting cases that are fun to do and that kind of thing. And this is the prime example in my career, in my entire career, because this has only happened to me one time, thank God. I've never had this happen to me before. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had numerous infidelity cases they really were cheating, but I've never had it be a parent before that their spouse was, or girlfriend or boyfriend was cheating with. So this was new for me, and thank God it's never happened before, and it's never happened since. But it does give you an idea of how emotionally stressful this job can be, and sometimes you get answers you just don't want. And this was one of those cases. I got the answer I just didn't want. Like I said, when I caught her on video cheating, I had no idea who it was, because they had given me a picture of his best friend and his brother, and I'd followed them for a week each. So I knew exactly who they were. So I knew it wasn't either one of them. But I didn't know who it was. But my friend did, because he knew the entire family. And so when I showed him the video, he was the one that was able to tell me it was his dad. And I couldn't believe it. I was shocked when he said that's who it was. And because I even told him, I said, are you 100% positive? He said, yes. He said, without a doubt. He said, that's who it is. And so, yeah, sometimes this job isn't great. Sometimes this job gets way out of hand, and you get answers you just don't want. So, but I wanted to start with that one this week to be able to get it out of the way, because I knew I was going to tell it at some point. So I thought, you know what? I'll just tell that up front so I can get out of the way, because that's the most disgusting, hardest case I've ever had in my career, and I can just get it out of the way, and by the ones going forward, they would know at least aren't going to be anything like that. Now, there's going to be sadder cases, because I've had a lot of cases that deal with a lot of death, even death of children, and that's extremely hard on me when I end up having to deal with a case that involves the death of a child. And those cases, I haven't decided whether I'm going to talk about. I know I'm not going to talk about too many. There's a couple that I might talk about, because it helps parents to be careful with their kids, with who they're trusting with them. Because the one thing that I can tell you as a private investigator, and I can tell you that any police officer will tell you, any judge will tell you, any prosecutor will tell you, any defense attorney will tell you, it's a very, very, very small percentage, about 10% of people who hurt children are strangers. The other 90% are people they know. And unfortunately, a large percentage of those are family members. And so there is a couple of stories that I'll tell at some point, just so that the parents will know, I don't care who they are, you don't trust anybody 100%. You just don't. I don't care who they are, you just don't trust anybody 100% with your child. If your child is acting different or tells you something happened, believe them. You never, ever accuse your child of lying when they come to you and tell you something serious has happened to them. Because I have never in my career had a child make up a false story about being abused in one way or another by somebody. Not one time. I've had parents accuse them of lying, and it made the situation far worse. But I've never had one actually make a false story up. No child in any of the cases I've ever dealt with has ever been lying. whenever they've told that they were being abused. So I don't care who they say is doing it, believe them. Check it. Find out what's going on. Because that's the one thing that you got to do above all else is protect your kids. So anyways, I'm winning this one. Looks like most of these will be about the same amount of time, probably around about 10 minutes long, unless it's like a really in-depth case, because most cases I can, tell within 10 minutes. And you don't have to sit there and listen to me talk for an hour and a half. So, but yeah, if you got questions about private investigation, or if you got a case that you need me to look at, leave it in the comments down below. Or if it's a private one that you just don't want to be out publicly, send me a DM through YouTube and I'll reach out to you directly. But that's all I need. So I will see you in the next video. Talk to you later.